Hello everyone, and welcome to another Sunday morning with the Bookseller. I'm your host, Jessica Gillen, here to bring you another review. And this week, on Easter, April Fool's Day, it is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This show is brought to you by Eventide Entertainment. Awesome. I am so happy to be back doing my show. This is the second show that I am doing since being back, and it feels good. The energy is right. I got a candle going. I got something to drink. Man, it feels good to be recording. So, with all of that said, this week has some fun shit going down. So, I told you last week that I was going to be branching out, including this community, the book community, a little bit more with my podcast, and also giving you more content to enjoy. Now, that first thing is going to be a YouTube channel, which will be live April 2nd on Monday. So look for that. I will have the link in the description. So please check out that YouTube channel. You'll see a video on there that's going to be my introduction. You get to know me, my face, and we're even going to talk about the books that I'm reading for the next couple weeks. We have some good books, hopefully, that will keep me entertained and not want to go crazy like this book that we're going to talk about today. But we'll get to that in a minute. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is my Patreon account, which is also going to go live on Monday. So the fun thing about that is I have different tiers. I only talked about last week that there was, for people that supported me on Patreon, are going to get exclusive content to, such as watching my bloopers or my outtakes when I'm recording a podcast show. So when I'm recording a podcast show, I am actually also recording myself on a camera at the same time. So you may get me very well edited and poised and coherent, but in my outtakes and bloopers, you're going to see all of my mess ups, all of my ridiculous faces that I make that you have no idea were there. So even if you're just a $5, $1, I'm pretty sure it's the lowest tier, you get access to that, and that's pretty cool. So, aside from that, I'm also going to be doing giveaways every month for my Patreon supporters. Again, there's different tiers, and you'll get to see that a little bit more if you look it up. But, for instance, you're going to get, handmade bookmarks from yours truly. Now, mind you, I'm not an amazing artist, but a bookmark is something that I can do. It will be cute, and who doesn't want an awesome bookmark? I mean, really. But aside from that, I will also do every month a giveaway for a brand new release. So I will send you a brand new book, hardcover, beautifully written off the press, hot and ready for you, just like a Little Caesar's pizza. Delivered to you by yours truly. And who knows, maybe there'll be a little something extra in that. I'm not sure yet. But aside from the giveaways and the outtakes and bloopers, you also have the opportunity to get to interact with me when I'm doing my gaming nights too. So for those of you that don't know, I also stream. I recently took a break for a little while just to kind of restart everything. But I stream about 1 to 2 days a week. I kind of do it for me just to have fun and get to talk to people in a different community. I'm a huge video gamer. I play PC and PlayStation 4. And there's all sorts of games. So I'm going to have an exclusive Bookseller Discord channel for you to join me on there if you're a Patreon supporter. So there's a lot of goodies. Even if you just check it out and see what it's all about, see what the different tiers have to offer, there's a lot more I'm not even telling you. Just go check it out. It's going to be linked in the description. So yeah, thank you for your support and just keep listening. I really appreciate everybody who listens to my episodes, And I love getting feedback. You guys are awesome and wonderful. So, enough of that. I kind of feel like we should take a mini break before we tear this book to shreds. I think that's a good idea. So make sure to stay tuned. We're going to get into this book review right after everything that we have to offer you at Eventide Entertainment.
Wednesdays on Eventide, Robert Yetter and Mike Shea sit down and throw albums at each other, talking about them, picking them apart, ripping them a new one. All different artists, all different genres, all different levels of suckage. It's Track Record, Wednesdays at 9 a.m. on the Eventide podcast feed. For more information, go to eventideent.com.
You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company.
Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes.
All right, thank you for listening to all that. Really appreciate everyone's support, especially if you check out those other shows that we have here at Eventide Entertainment. We have something for everybody. I promise you that. So enough of the business talk, okay? It's time to get into The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So this book I read during my interlude, that's what we'll call it, my interlude where I was not able to do my podcast show because I did not have my microphone. This was one of the books, and it took me forever to read it. I am not kidding you. Probably 2 weeks, maybe going on 3 weeks, suffering through that book. I read other things on the side just so I wouldn't get completely burnt out on reading. Like, this book made me hate reading. So, as you can tell, I have a lot of problems with it. But let's get down to the mechanics of this book first, so I can at least describe to you, and then we can go into the nitty-gritty here. So, The Cruel Prince is by Holly Black. It is book 1 in the Folk of the Air. It is 384 pages in hardcover, and it was published very recently, January 2nd, 2018. It has a Goodreads rating of 4.25 and a 4.7 on Amazon. That just blows my mind. Anyway, there's going to be a book 2. I am not sure if this is a trilogy. Most books in YA seem to be trilogies. There's not a lot of standalones in this category. That's just the way it is. You know what? I like series if they're done right, so cool, fine. Book 2 is going to be called The Wicked King. It also has a book cover. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the book cover at least. And it's going to be published January 8th, 2019. So almost exactly a year after this book that was just released. So Holly Black is a pretty popular writer, especially in YA, but also in middle grade, and she actually also has some graphic novels. I have, I think, one of her books. I want to say it's White Cat. Never read it. I just have never really been pulled towards her writing before, and the reason I was pulled towards The Cruel Prince was because it was getting a lot of hype. A lot of people were talking about it on Goodreads. A lot of people on YouTube were talking about it. It was just getting the hype that either really makes a book and it catapults it into stardom, like Divergent, The Hunger Games, Twilight, and then sometimes it can be the opposite where it really takes a book down at the knees. I haven't heard any rumblings yet about if this book has been, the rights to it for a movie have been bought. Not 100% on that. I'll look into it and kind of give you some details on that next week. But moral of the story, hype can make or break a book series. Apparently, a lot of people liked this, and that's okay. I mean, it kind of isn't just because of what was in this book. I am so flippin' surprised and disappointed, okay? I'm disappointed in my book community for loving this book so much. We'll get into that. Let's talk about the synopsis. This synopsis is pulled from Goodreads. I do not make these because I do not want to give you spoilers. I'm trying to be as spoiler-free as possible. I will start to make YouTube videos, though, that will go into more in-depth discussion on books, and you can watch those videos if you do want spoilers, if you really want to know the in-depth conversation about the book. And that'll be all books in the future. I'm not really 100% sure if I want to talk about this book any more than I will today. So, here we go. Jude was 7 years old when her parents were murdered, and she and her 2 sisters were stolen away to live in the treacherous high court of Fairy. 10 years later, Jude wants nothing more than to belong there, despite her morality. But many of the Fae despise humans, especially Prince Cardin, the youngest and wickedest son of the High King. To win a place at the court, she must defy him and face the consequences. In doing so, she becomes embroiled in a palace intrigues and deceptions, discovering her own capacity for bloodshed. But as civil war threatens to drown the courts of Fairy in violence, Jude will need to risk her life in a dangerous alliance to save her sisters and Fairy itself. Alright, so as you can tell by the synopsis, it is Jude is our main protagonist that we follow in this book. It is mostly all about her. There is other characters that kind of come in, or definitely side characters. Her sisters are really prominent in the book. But for the most part, she is the center of the book and everything that's happening around her, through her, about her. So she is a human, and she is in this fairy world. I personally have never read books about this genre before. Again, it is a fantasy genre, but I've never read fae books. It's never really been something I'm pulled towards. I've been intrigued and I've wanted to try. I've heard of other books in this category before. I'm trying to think. There's the one by like Julie Kagawa, I'm pretty sure. She had like a whole series of fae. And Holly Black, from what I understand, this is her subject. She loves writing about fae. I do not know anything about it. I went in kind of being, this is my first book of the fae world. And given how much hype it had, I thought, okay, this is going to give me a lot and I'm going to be excited. Maybe I'll want to read more. All right. So let's talk about the first category that I like to break down my books into, and that is world building. As you have heard me in the past, I love world building. It is one of my favorite parts of the fantasy genre, just because that is what a fantasy book is. It's about creating a whole new world, something that only your deepest imagination can think of. Even dreams don't have that much imagination in them. I love this genre, and world building is one of the most important pieces of this genre to me as a reader. So, the world building in this book wasn't good. It wasn't terrible. I wouldn't say it was the worst thing. It definitely was confusing, though. There was a lot of pieces missing. But let me just start off by saying that her writing had a lot of imagery and metaphors and was very pretty. I love fairies in the sense of like the forest. I am a really big tree person, even in life as is. I love going camping. I love being in nature. I love forest. I love moss. You know, I'm all about that. So her descriptions of the world were well done. However, I felt as if she was trying to, let me in on this world that she has created, but I felt like there was so many pieces missing that I didn't get the complete picture. I felt like instead of in world building, you feel like you're a part of that world while you're reading it, that you're inside of that world and this plot is going around you and you're kind of just like a watcher, so to speak. But I felt like I was watching, but it was behind a glass panel in front of my face, that I wasn't feeling like I could really interact or close my eyes and really see this world that she created. I felt like there was a major disconnect. And I think the reason there was such a disconnect was because there was a really big lack of the history, the political intrigue. She did have parts of it, but it did not make sense. She didn't spend enough time talking about the courts, how, fairy works. I have never read fairy, and I felt like this book was targeted towards people that have been in this genre before, but that really alienates readers that are not familiar and are using your book to get introduced. This did not make me want to read more fae books. It confused me. I didn't understand. I felt disconnected. So while it was very beautiful and, I did get lost in some ways just because of the imagery and how pretty it sounded, I felt like I was just missing a great deal of the backstory, the history. The passages were beautiful, but it stopped there. I didn't understand how the world worked. I didn't know, I didn't know anything. I was just confused. I don't know how else to explain it. Just, it felt like when she would explain the magic system in Fae, like how, I know that fairies don't like humans and that they play a lot of tricks and they're trickery kind of little mythical creatures and stuff. But that's the only extent of knowledge I know. So when she would explain the magic, it just felt incredibly lackluster. Basically, the only magic that fays could do was to enchant people. But they can't enchant or compel their own kind. They can only do that on humans, which is, why we get a lot of the scenes of, like, the human zombie slaves that are, compelled to think that they're in this enchanted world and they're cleaning up, the fairy's castle or whatever. That was one of the main scenes I remember from the book. It just didn't make sense how it worked. I understood that they could compel humans, but how did they do that? What did they do? I did not understand the magic. I just felt like it was badly portrayed, and a lot of it wasn't explained how it worked, and instead, it was just kind of like, a fairy did something, and it was just like, that was magic. It didn't explain to me how that was magic, or why that person was compelled. It just was. There was no explanation. So that was the world building aspect. It was pretty, yes. Did I understand anything? No. And because of that, I felt disconnected from the book and I couldn't get into it. It felt like a chore reading this book. I mean, it should not take me 2 to 3 weeks reading, not even a 400-page book. I was able to read Renegades in a week, and that was huge. So, definitely did not captivate me. I'm just, oh, man. All right, the plot. So, I wrote on my little note here, the first thing I says was, this book sucked for nearly 75% of the time. This is my little bullet point that I have for myself. And it's true. The first 3/4 of the book, I just was like, what is going on? There is no plot. You're basically just giving me random scenes about Jude getting bullied by these mean fairy, and, there was just a lot of bullying scenes, a lot of scenes with her kind of going back and forth on who she was and what she wanted. Like, she was very much just wishy-washy. She didn't stick to anything. She was stubborn, but yet she demanded everyone around her to be clear. It just, I don't know. It was very boring. Nothing in the plot moved. I didn't know why I was reading this. What was the point to a majority of the scenes that I read? Like, I understood that you were trying to set up the cruel Prince Cardin or Candon or whatever his name is, to be this really nasty fairy, but somehow still also kind of a romantic interest, it felt like, which we'll get into later, but that was really messed up. Yeah, we'll get into that, but it just felt like a lot of setting up him to be this really mean fairy. And the thing is, like, you don't need to beat me over the head with that. I would have rather her, instead of having so many scenes of Jude being bullied by these fairy, to instead explain to me how the fairy court worked. Explain to me these mythical creatures and their history and how they work. And, I mean, I just didn't understand. And when I don't understand what I'm reading, I'm not going to be captivated. Especially when there's no plot, it's not moving. I'm basically just reading words with nothing happening. No progression. And that was the same with the character development. I mean, there was a major lack of character development, which, you know, I've said in the past with book one is supposed to be about the world building. You're telling me about the world and you're setting up the characters. It had neither of those things. It just felt like I was reading a book that had no meaning. Just frustrating. So I will say that the best parts of the book was how dark, gory, bloody it would get sometimes. I'm kind of dark. I do like my gory shows. I do not shy away from blood and guts kind of thing. And that was kind of cool to see, like, how dark of a fae book this was. I felt like it could have been darker, but it was really nice when those action scenes happened. When the last 25% of the book happened, it was very much like, okay, now we're getting a plot, now we're going, now we got the gore, the blood, this crazy plot twist. The last, not even, I would say, like, not even the last 100 pages. It was probably like the last 80 pages, the last 75 pages were the best part of the book. And that pissed me off because I wasted all of that time getting no progression in the plot, not understanding why I was reading this, not getting any world building, not getting any character development. Instead, she threw everything that she had the last bit of the book, and I felt like it was a cop-out in order for people to be hooked. She used a cliffhanger as a device to encourage people to pick up book 2. That irritates me. I'm okay with cliffhangers. I like cliffhangers. But do not give me nothing, and then the last 80 pages, give me it all. No, I'm not okay with that. So while the last bit of the book was bloody, it was gory, it was fun to read, it's still, at that point, I was just done. I was like, yeah, this is cool, but you have tested your luck with me for far too long, ma'am. I'm done. All right, so let's talk about the characters, I guess. So the main protagonist is Jude, and I really want to love Jude because of the terrible tragedy that her and her sisters go through in the beginning with her family. I don't want to give anything away. It happens the first couple pages of the book. It is a very big tragedy. Something happens with her family, and they get kidnapped, her and her sisters, and taken to this fae world by this crazy fae assassin. And then she lives with him, and this person is like a father figure for the rest of the book. I'm not even kidding you. So I thought that this tragedy would be a really big part of how Jude was created, or how her character developed into who she is now. But instead, when she would kind of reflect on that tragedy, she would say a lot of, I don't remember. It's not that important. I love my life here in Faye. And that just irritated me. I wonder if it was like, you know, people that go through tragedies sometimes compartmentalize. They might also block out really painful experiences, but it didn't feel like that. It just felt like she was kind of like wiping her hands clean and just been like, meh. You know, I was too young to really understand what was happening or to really have a lot of attachments to my old life in the human world. She grew up the last 10 years in the land of Fae with all the magical stuff. So, I mean, you know, of course she forgets her real life. So she kind of grew to have some sort of weird Sherlock Holmes syndrome thing, or Sherlock, whatever they say that syndrome is, you know, where the man that stole her and her sisters to Fairy, she just wanted to prove herself to him, or, you know, she was okay with how tough of a person he was, like, just like that Sherlock Holmes syndrome, you know, where they just kind of not fall in love with their captor, but they're okay with what's happening to them. Yeah, I don't know. It just really, I wish she would have used that as a legit character development piece, but instead it just felt like the complete opposite. She was stubborn. Jude was stubborn, which was nice. But again, like I've said, she felt wishy-washy. I couldn't understand what she wanted or what her objective was, because there was no development to know who she was then and who she wanted to become now. Like, there was a little bit, but it was just so, I don't know, it just felt like very lazy to me. All right. I'm going to get into something that's really going to make me upset, and this is the main reason why I am so disappointed by how well ratings this gets. A lot of the ratings that I've seen, people are like, oh my god, swoon, this was such a good book, best book ever, like, I can't believe this, or, you know, 2 weeks later and I'm still thinking about this book, it was just so good. Oh, that's fine. You can like it. But, let me preface this. Someone said this on the review that didn't like it, and I think it's perfect. The book, at the beginning, like the first page, it should have said this disclosure. And I'll read it because it's from this reviewer. I thought it was perfect and genius and exactly what I'm trying to get at. Quote, people and relationships seen in this book cannot and should not be considered in any way healthy. The author took the liberty to fantasize about bullies and their victims. This fantasy should absolutely not be mistaken for portrayal of love, affection, or friendship. 100% agree. The reason is, Jude, the main character, she's being bullied by Fae because Fae do not like humans, and they are cruel to them and play a lot of tricks, and they're mischievous. But this was outright bullying, and she put up with it. She was okay. I mean, she wasn't okay with it happening, but she just kept letting it happen. She didn't take charge like she should have. And instead, it kind of fantasized this role of this really mean character, Prince Cardan. I don't know how to say his name. It's like Cardan. Prince Cardan. He was the main guy, super mean, super cruel. And yes, you learn a little bit about like why he's like that. But at the same time, it's like those, I can fix him type of story. And that is so infuriating to me when books do that. I mean, she even was okay with how she was being treated, and she started to fall for one of the people in the friend group who was just giving her some positive attention, but not really investigating and seeing, is this person being legit? Are they treating me right? Is this all for show? She was just so in her head thinking this was okay. And, a majority of the characters in this book were bullies. The father figure was a bully. the possible love interest, was the bully of the book. And it was not enjoyable for me to read about constant bullying experiences. It was just overdone. I get that the book is called The Cruel Prince, but you do not need to give these scenes to me constantly to prove that point. And he's abusive, like plain and simple. And nobody is really talking about this in their reviews. There's a couple people that I saw that, didn't mention this. And it's kind of like, this genre, this age group, young adult, is targeted towards young women, for the most part, I would say. And that is telling young women that it is okay if a boy is mean to you and he teases you and he bullies you, because you can fix him, and everybody goes through traumatic experiences, and that doesn't mean that they're a bad person. No, I agree with you, it doesn't. But if they inflict harm on other people over and over and over again and do not change, do not pursue them. I am just really sick of reading books about one of the characters falling in love with a bad boy who is, going to be redeemed. No, we do not need to teach girls that they need to put up with an abusive behavior just because a guy tells them what they want to hear outside of that abuse. It would be one thing if this book, and others that have this common theme, take this as a teaching moment. But instead, it is something sought after and readers swoon over. They love the hard to understand bad boy. And I'm done. I'm over it. I was not a fan, and that really, really irritated me. Maybe I just like my partner to be kind and sweet and treat me as an equal. I do not want my little sister, or anybody else for that matter, related to me or not, for you to pursue somebody that's mean to you. You deserve more than that. And this book was just, I don't know. So, in conclusion, I gave this 2 stars. Outside of the abusive thing that really irritated me, which was really just an underlining element, that was probably the thing that bothered me, but it wasn't the forefront of my issues. It was the lack of world development, the lack of me understanding the politics. I've never read a fairy book before, and it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand how any of the court system worked. I didn't understand how any of the magic worked. And this book might be more targeted towards readers that have experience in this particular subgenre in fantasy. Personally, for me, as a first-time reader, it did not do a good introduction to this subgenre. So, overall, 2 stars. Didn't like it. I'm glad I just got it from the library. I don't have it anymore. And big disappointment. That hype, I am very confused. And I really hope that the reason people liked it was because that they have experience reading fae books. And this was just kind of felt like a darker story to that, I guess. That I could understand. But for someone who wants to learn or understand fairy or that subgenre, this is not the book you want to introduce you to. It is boring. There's no plot development. And it could possibly piss you off like it did with me. So that was a very big rant podcast episode. And I apologize. Obviously, this doesn't happen to me often. I don't usually rage about books. This one just really got under my skin, especially with how much hype it's gotten. I think it could have been better. I don't have experience with Holly Black. I have heard good things about her other series. I know that she likes this subgenre a lot and likes to write it. So I'm just hoping that maybe she was writing this for her followers that have read her other stuff before, because they already know how the world works. but for a new reader, it just wasn't for me. So, but as you can see, a lot of people liked it, so you might too. Please understand this is completely just my own thoughts and feelings. I do not mean to bash the book. I am just highly critical in certain ways in this genre. So, with that said, I have been reading Unearthed, which is also a new fantasy book. I really like it. I can't wait to talk to you about it next week. It is going to be a gush kind of episode. So make sure to look for that. Also check out my YouTube channel. It's dropping on Monday, as well as my Patreon account. You can also find me on Twitter, as well as email me and on Goodreads. I hope you have a wonderful week and happy Easter.